This is the Geek Cabal channel. My name is Bobby, and today we're going to be talking about Terminator Zero on Netflix. Welcome to the Geek Cabal channel. Today we're going to be talking about Terminator Zero, currently running on Netflix. I'm recording this early in September 2024 for any kind of future reference. Not that I really anticipate this show winding up on another streaming service because it's a Netflix original, but you never know. So, this show came out last week, August 29th, which for those of you who don't know the significance of that date from Terminator 2, that is the date that Judgment Day occurs. August 29th, 1997 is when Skynet launches the nukes and ends the human civilization as we know it, and wipes out about half the human race. So, what's going on here with this show? I'll have spoilers at the end, but I'm going to just kind of touch on a bunch of non-spoiler stuff first. So this is an anime series, and it's produced by Studio IG, and I know years and years ago they made the Street Fighter 2 animated movie, and I know they definitely make something else more recently, but I'm kind of behind on my assorted anime projects at the moment. So I don't honestly know what else they make at the moment, which is terrible because I literally just read an article. It's like, oh, you might recognize this company from such and such, and I've totally forgotten what that was. So if you know, tell me down in the comments, please. But it's quality animation and vocals and everything. So this is an 8-episode series set in the Terminator franchise. This is the minorest of spoilers. It is completely divorced from the John and Sarah Connor, I don't want to say chronicles because that was a show, adventures, we'll call it that. And so it's its own thing. It's set in that world, but it's set in Japan. So, like I said, 8 episodes. They're approximately half hour each, and it's very good. It's definitely like the kind of thing that the series needs to evolve to kind of hit more of a modern appeal. Now, as much as I love the Terminator movies, the older ones, like, it's kind of like I start to like them less the higher the number gets, with the exception of from 1 to 2. I do like 2 about the same as I like the first one. I think the first one's like, sci-fi masterpiece kind of stuff. 2 is like a super big budget remake of 1. So, it's great, but I don't really think it tread very new ground as far as the story itself. It's basically just the plot to the first movie again, with a few things kind of shuffled around, and putting into play the idea that, yeah, we really can change the future. Keep that in mind, by the way, when we get to the spoiler section. So, like I said, it looks great. Now, if you watch the English dub, because since it is an anime, you have the choice to watch it in Japanese with subtitles. I did not. I'm not an anime snob or purist or however you want to phrase that. I watched it with the English dub, and the 2 actors who jumped out at me were Timothy Olyphant. He does the voice of the Terminator, criminally underused until like episode 8, and then I believe it said that Rosario Dawson was someone in the show. I think it's Kokoro, but I'm not sure. I should have double checked that before I started filming. And I'm not saying there's no one else in it. I just didn't check the IMDb page. So there's probably other people that you know in it. So it bounces back and forth. There's a little bit of future war stuff. There's present day. Well, present day being late August 1997, and it was interesting placing it there And there's definitely like some clues surrounding some things that I should have figured out, but alas, I did not when it finally was revealed what the pseudo mystery was. I just kind of hit myself in the forehead like, yes, of course that's the answer. Why wouldn't that have been the answer? Why didn't I figure that out? I'll explain that in the spoiler section. Hopefully, if I remember by the time I get there in my ramblings. But it, like I said, it embraces ideas that I feel the franchise should have embraced from the beginning, and that the movies seem to have accepted without actually stating it until like Genesis, where there it does kind of like, hey, so this is kind of a thing. And then this show just spells it out, point blank. And I don't really want to go into spoilers, so I'll explain it in the spoiler section what I'm talking about. But if you're a fan of the Terminator franchise and you like anime, or one or both of those things, you should definitely check this out. There are some parts that, like, I think it explains it well enough to follow it. But even I have a couple questions, and I was paying attention. So things can get a little choppy in the explanation at one point. But that is about as far as I can go. Well, I will mention one thing. I thought it was genius setting it in Japan because, unlike 1980s Los Angeles, it is notoriously difficult to get a hold of firearms in Japan. So both the Terminator and the Resistance fighter basically have to kind of like come up with some alternate ideas, and so it forces them to be a little creative, which was interesting. So, yeah, and there's some other things like that. But overall, I thought it was really good. It does leave off where there could be a season 2, so, we'll see if that happens. But anyway, that's about as far as I can really go without going into spoilers. So if you're not going to follow me into the spoiler zone here, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Let me know down in the comments if you plan on watching this, if you think it's trash and you're not going to watch it, if you jumped off the train somewhere back in like Dark Fate or Genesis or Salvation, Rise of the Machines. Anywhere along there. Then, yeah, let me know down there in the comments. So, now, into the spoiler zone. So, the thing I kind of alluded to is the idea that the show fully embraces the alternate timeline concept. See, the original movie, especially once you account for a deleted scene, is a time loop. Kyle Reese goes back because he has to go back because he's John Connor's father. John Connor sends him back so he can be his father. The Terminator goes back to stop Sarah Connor, but also so its remains can be used to build Skynet. So everything has to happen. It's a time loop. Terminator 2 is what screws everything up. Because Terminator 2 brings us into a situation where they do actually change the future. But by doing that, they've created a paradox. So Terminator 3 has to kind of right the ship. So the problem is Terminator 2, without knowing it, embraced the alternate timeline theory. Because that's the only way it can work. Is that once you go back, you begin a different branch of the timeline. Because you can't change your own past, because then you would be different and you get into the paradox cycle. So it has to be, once you go back, you begin a different branch on the timeline, where now the future that you came from is your past. It still happens someplace else. But you're now off into the unknown, the Twilight Zone or something. So, this show very specifically spells that out. Because there's a conversation where the woman who's going to go back in time is talking to an old woman, and she's like, what do you think happens when you go back in time? And the girl that's going to go back is like, I don't know, I'd go back into the past, right, to change the future, change the present. And so the woman explains to her the utter stupidity and futility of Skynet's plan. It doesn't understand that whenever it sends a Terminator back in time, it cannot change its current situation. Because the past is the past. The past will always be the past. You can't change it. All it's doing is creating another timeline where maybe it wins, but the Skynet Prime, cannot change its own fate. You know, what has happened has happened. And so she talks about the futility of, they send a machine, we send a guy, back and, round and round we go. So, she explains that what, happens is you're going back in time to create a new timeline. And so then the girl asks, like, well, then why am I doing that? Because that means I won't save anyone here. And she's like, you're right, you won't. And she tries to impress upon her that they have no fate. Like, they're not bound by any fate. What's going to happen is what they make happen. And she tells her that, once you figure out why you're still going to do this, that's the important thing. Because the machines will never figure it out. But if she can, and she understands it, then she's got a leg up on the machine. So set against the backdrop of this, back in the past, it's like August 28th, there's a man in Japan who has built an AI that he hopes to use to fight Skynet. Kokoro is his name. Now, this was I should have figured this out part. He has dreams of Judgment Day. He knows it's coming. He dreams of the nuclear fire and everything. And he designs this AI in the 90s. Because remember, Skynet wasn't designed to be an AI. It was, or wasn't designed to be an uncontrolled AI. It became smarter than they could control very quickly. So it was an unintended concept. It was an emergent property. Whereas he intentionally designs one, which is far in advance of what technology can achieve at that point in time. So it never occurred to me, well, this guy's obviously from the future. And yeah, that ends up being the other shoe to drop with him. And then there's some twists at the end I'm not going to go into. But, so he's developing this AI, but his problem is he knows that if he just turns it on, there's the chance that it's going to be like, I don't know, I like the cut of your jib, Skynet. Let's take out the human race. And that's what he's trying to avoid. So he has to make sure that Kokoro understands why it needs to defend humanity and everything. And it's never able to give him an answer. So just out of blind desperation, he has to turn it on once Skynet launches the nuclear assault. And Kokoro is able to commandeer other nukes to use them to stop the nukes that Skynet launched. So it stops Judgment Day, but now he's stuck with the situation of Kokoro's like, well, I mean, I think Skynet overreacted, but I'm not entirely certain that just because Skynet's your enemy means that Skynet is my enemy. I think he got him around to understanding that, yes, Skynet is your enemy. But then it became, okay, I'm going to use humans as pawns to take out Skynet. And he's just like, God damn it. Like, now we're in the same or worse position here. And I think he finally gets it to understand. I think. It's kind of complicated at the end. And then the Terminator is going to use like the EMP thing built into the building, the defense thing, because the guy has an EMP device built in case the thing goes rogue. And he's going to try to use it to fry Kokoro, but it will also destroy him, and he can't self-terminate. So he has to try to convince one of the humans to do it. And he feeds in this line about how in the future, like, that kid grew up to send him back in time to do this. And he told him some stuff, and I have no idea if he's lying about it. You know, it's one of those, like, it's so fantastical. We don't see that in the future, but we also don't see everything in the future, so maybe it is true. I don't know. But yeah, we find out some interesting interpersonal dynamics about everybody, and the why certain people went back, and so on and so on. But we end up with a situation where Kokoro is basically in control of Japan with like an army of robots out in the streets, is fending off the constant attempts at attack from Skynet with the nukes, and is kind of in a stalemate. Seems to maybe understand at least where the humans are coming from, if not agreeing with them. And yeah, that's where the show ends. So, I mean, it's it's short. It's like 4 hours. To me, the interesting part was once you begin to realize that they're definitely going with the alternate timeline theory, that like we're seeing different future timelines in the future scenes, especially with the revelation at the end of the show. So there's one set of scenes that follow the main female character that goes back to fight the Terminator, and the Terminator that goes back to fight this other AI. Now, I've got to double check the other movies, but if I recall from this series correctly, they end up going back in 2022. And the way they talk about it, they're like, oh, Skynet sent another machine back in time. Like, oh, this again. But I believe in the main timeline, it's 2029 that the Terminator and Kyle Reese come from to go back. So this Terminator and this Resistance fighter, if I'm right on those dates, are from a shortened timeline where Skynet 7 years before is already trying the time travel gambit and has already done so at least once. So a lot of things have definitely happened in that timeline. And then some other characters show up from the 2030s and you see them going through. And I don't think I think that, like, for them, Skynet's already tried the time travel gambit, and it hasn't worked out, obviously, because it can't work. And so that's where they got the plans for the time machine. But yeah, and then, so it's crazy. We've got people from different timelines coming back to try to affect the same things. And, yeah, it's just craziness all over the place. And that's, to me, that's what the movies need. You know, Genesis was kind of going there with that whole who sent Arnold back in time. Like, we know Skynet sent the others, and clearly this is several iterations in, because there's like a T-1000 back in the 80s and all kinds of stuff like that. So, Genesis was on the right track. It just needed a little more something. I don't know. The moving forward in time should have been impossible. But, you know, it's just me. But, yeah. So, anyway, you got 4 hours floating of free time and you got Netflix. Definitely check this out. Well worth a watch. Looking forward to season 2. I hope this is the forward direction of the franchise if it comes back to live action. I hope it makes them realize they don't have to focus on Sarah and John Connor. Like, I love them as characters and everything, but, like, there are other people involved. So, anyway, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Commenting and sharing are the biggest things to help us grow the channel. Comment down below if you've seen the show, plan to watch the show, etc., etc. Well, what's your favorite Terminator movie? Do you think it went downhill after a certain number in the series? Would you be interested in me doing a video outlining the timeline of at least the 6 movies This is going to be more difficult to chart, but the 6 movies I can do. So you want to see that, let me know. It's a project I've had kind of rolling around the back of my head for a while, trying to figure out how best to represent it here on the screen and everything. So anyway, other than that, I guess that's probably it. So let's see, what can we go with here? I could do a really terrible Arnold impression and go with the Hasta la Vista, baby. No, just remember, there is no fate but what we make for ourselves.